In the sun-baked heart of 1880s Arizona territory, hope arrives on a dusty stagecoach. Sarah Mitchell steps down, her trembling hand instinctively rising to cover the jagged scar that mars her cheek, a constant reminder of the fire that took her family. She's come west as a mail-order bride, carrying nothing but dreams of a fresh start and a letter promising marriage. But dreams shatter quickly in adobe wells. Cruel whispers follow her down the street, and mocking glances cut deeper than any scar could. Just when Sarah's ready to board the next stage out of town, destiny arrives on horseback. A wealthy rancher, whose own past is written in the quiet wisdom of his eyes, sees beyond her scar to the strength beneath. But in a town where appearances mean everything, can love truly conquer all? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The tarnished hand mirror lay face down on the boarding house dresser, its silver backing peeling at the edges like autumn leaves. Sarah hadn't looked at her reflection since stepping off the stagecoach, but her fingers kept straying to the raised edge of her scar, tracing its familiar path from cheekbone to jaw. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the lace curtains, painting patterns across the faded wallpaper of what would be her home until the wedding, if there was to be a wedding at all. "Miss Mitchell," Mrs. Henderson's gentle voice accompanied a soft knock. "I've brought up some fresh towels and a pot of chamomile tea." Sarah smoothed her travel-worn skirts and opened the door to find the boarding house proprietor balancing a tea tray with practiced ease. Mrs. Henderson was a woman who wore her years with grace, silver threading through her dark hair and laugh, lines marking the corners of her kind eyes. "You must be exhausted from your journey," Mrs. Henderson said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "The stage from Tucson is never a comfortable ride, especially in this heat." "Thank you, ma'am. You're very kind." Sarah accepted the offered cup, the warmth seeping through her trembling fingers. She caught Mrs. Henderson's quick glance at her scar, but unlike the stares she'd endured on her walk from the stage depot, there was no revulsion in the older woman's eyes, only a gentle sympathy that somehow hurt worse than disgust. "Now then," Mrs. Henderson said, pouring herself a cup and settling into the room's single armchair, "why don't you tell me about yourself? Mr. Peterson, your intended, he's not due to arrive until tomorrow morning, and I find that new arrivals often need a friendly ear more than they need solitude." Sarah's hand crept up to her cheek again before she forced it back to her lap. "There isn't much to tell, really. I was working as a seamstress in Boston when I saw Mr. Peterson's advertisement. We exchanged letters for several months, and he seemed—" She paused, searching for the right word. "He seemed kind, honest. He wrote about his dry goods store and his plans to expand now that the railroad's coming through." Mrs. Henderson nodded encouragingly, but Sarah noticed how she glanced away, something unspoken hiding behind her pleasant expression. "Mr. Peterson is well established in our community," she said carefully. "His store does good business." A commotion from the street drew Sarah to the window. A group of young women about her age were gathered outside the millinery shop across the way, their heads bent together in conversation. One looked up, caught sight of Sarah, and quickly whispered to her companions. They all turned to stare, and even through the glass, Sarah could see the mixture of curiosity and revulsion on their faces. "Pay them no mind, dear," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "Small towns run on gossip, but the novelty will wear off soon enough." But Sarah had lived with her scar long enough to know better. The novelty never wore off. People just learned to hide their stares better, to whisper instead of point. She touched the letter in her pocket, Mr. Peterson's precise handwriting, describing his hope for a companion of gentle disposition and domestic inclinations. There had been no mention of beauty in his requirements, but then again she hadn't mentioned her scar in her replies. "I should unpack," Sarah said, turning away from the window, "and I'd like to freshen up before supper if that's all right." "Of course, dear. Supper's at 6 sharp. We'll have chicken and dumplings tonight." Mrs. Henderson gathered the tea things, pausing at the door. "And Miss Mitchell? Welcome to Adobe Wells. Things have a way of working out here, even if not quite the way we expect." After Mrs. Henderson left, Sarah finally picked up the hand mirror, turning it over slowly. Her reflection stared back, the scar livid against her pale skin in the harsh afternoon light. She set the mirror face down again, trying to draw comfort from Mrs. Henderson's words. But as the sound of feminine laughter drifted up from the street below, Sarah wondered if she'd made a terrible mistake in coming west at all. The small gold ring felt impossibly heavy in Sarah's palm as she stood in Mrs. Henderson's parlour. It was a simple band, unadorned, save for a delicate engraving of leaves, the kind of ring a practical businessman would choose. Mr. Peterson had sent it ahead with his last letter, and she'd carried it across the continent, a promise of the future wrapped in tissue paper. "Miss Mitchell." Mr. Peterson's voice was exactly as she'd imagined from his letters, precise and measured, like his handwriting. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I must say, your letters did not fully represent your situation." He stood in the parlour doorway, a tall man with thinning hair and wire-rimmed spectacles that caught the morning light. His clothes were well-tailored but unremarkable, like everything else about him, except for the way his lips pulled back slightly when he looked at her face, the almost imperceptible step backward he took. "Mr. Peterson, Sarah began, but he held up one manicured hand. "Please." His voice was cold now, all trace of the warmth from his letters gone. "I run a respectable establishment. My customers expect a certain standard of appearance. You must understand that this arrangement cannot proceed." The ring dug into Sarah's palm as her fingers clenched around it. "You wrote that you wanted a companion, someone to help with the books and tend the store. I'm well educated, I can—" "Miss Mitchell." He adjusted his spectacles, looking somewhere past her left shoulder. "I'm sure you possess many admirable qualities, but I cannot have someone of your appearance representing my business. The ring, if you please." Sarah's hand moved mechanically, extending the ring. Mr. Peterson plucked it from her palm with a handkerchief, as if afraid of touching her skin. "I will, of course, cover your return fare to Boston. It's the proper thing to do. That won't be necessary." The words came from far away, spoken by someone else wearing her voice. "I thank you for your time, Mr. Peterson." He nodded stiffly and turned to go, then paused. "I would appreciate your discretion in this matter. Adobe Wells is a small town, and you need not worry about your reputation, sir." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. "I'm quite practiced at being invisible." The parlour door clicked shut behind him, the sound as final as a coffin nail. Sarah stood motionless, staring at the faded roses on the wallpaper until they blurred and swam before her eyes. A sob built in her throat, but she forced it down. She would not cry, not here, not now. "Oh, my dear." Mrs. Henderson's voice came from the connecting door to her private sitting room. How long had she been there? "I'm so very sorry." "You knew." "It wasn't a question. That's why you were so careful with your words yesterday." Mrs. Henderson sighed, crossing the room to touch Sarah's arm gently. "Walter Peterson is a proud man, set in his ways. I'd hoped— well, it doesn't matter what I'd hoped. Come have some tea." "I don't want tea." Sarah pulled away, her voice cracking. "I don't want your pity. I just want—" But what did she want? To be normal. To have never survived the fire that took her family, her beauty, her future. "What you want," Mrs. Henderson said firmly, "is to sit down before you fall down, and then we'll discuss your options. This isn't Boston, my dear. Out here, a woman of capability can make her own way." "My own way?" Sarah laughed, the sound raw and painful. "Look at me, Mrs. Henderson. Really look. No one will hire me. No one will want me in their shop, their home. I should have stayed in Boston where at least I had my sewing work. Perhaps," Mrs. Henderson guided her firmly to a chair, "or perhaps God has a different plan for you here." one that requires more courage than settling for a loveless marriage to a small-minded shopkeeper. Sarah sank into the chair, exhaustion suddenly weighing her down like wet wool. "I don't feel very courageous." "Few of us do, dear." Mrs. Henderson patted her shoulder. "Few of us do, but courage isn't about feeling brave. It's about going on anyway. Now about that tea." A bird sang somewhere in the garden outside, its song clear and sweet in the morning air. Sarah closed her eyes, letting the familiar motions of Mrs. Henderson preparing tea wash over her. One breath, then another. She had survived worse than this. She would survive this, too. The morning market in Adobe Wells sprawled across the town square, a patchwork of canvas awnings and wooden stalls, offering everything from fresh vegetables to home-sewn quilts. Sarah adjusted her grip on her empty basket, keeping her guard. Cheek turned away from the passing townspeople. After 3 days of hiding in her room, Mrs. Henderson had gently but firmly insisted she venture out for fresh air and supplies. "Best quality tomatoes in the territory," called old Mr. Martinez from his produce stand. His weathered face creased into a kind smile as Sarah approached. "New in town, señorita. My wife's tomatoes will make any stew taste like heaven itself." Sarah found herself returning his smile, grateful for the simple human kindness. "They look wonderful. I'll take 4, please." "That's the Peterson woman," a sharp voice carried across the square. "The one who tried to trap poor Walter into marriage without telling him about her condition." Sarah's fingers trembled as she counted out coins for Mr. Martinez. The voices behind her grew louder, deliberately so. "Can you imagine having to look at that every day across the breakfast table?" Another voice, younger, dripping with false sympathy. "No wonder he sent her packing." "Ladies," Mr. Martinez called out sharply, but Sarah was already turning away, her purchases forgotten. She bumped into someone, her basket tumbling from her hands. Vegetables rolled across the dusty ground as she stumbled backward. Well, if it isn't the deceitful bride herself. Sarah looked up into the face of a well-dressed woman, perhaps 40, her features arranged in an expression of exaggerated concern. "Oh dear, did I spoil your shopping? How clumsy of me." Behind her stood 3 younger women, the same ones Sarah had seen from her window that first day. "I apologize, ma'am." Sarah bent to retrieve her fallen basket, but the woman's boot came down on it, splintering the woven reed. "You know, my dear, some of us were quite concerned about your presence in town." The woman's voice carried across the now silent market square. A woman who would deceive a prospective husband. Well, one wonders what other deception she might attempt. "I never meant to," Sarah began, but the woman spoke over her. "Perhaps it would be best if you moved on. Somewhere more accepting of your kind. Adobe Wells is a respectable town." Sarah felt the familiar heat of shame creeping up her neck, but something else burned alongside it. Anger, fierce and unexpected. "And what kind would that be, ma'am? The kind who survives? The kind who dares to hope for a life despite not meeting your standards of beauty?" A collective gasp went up from the gathering crowd. The woman's face darkened with anger. "How dare you speak to me that way? I'm Mrs. Augusta Whitaker, and my husband is lucky to have such a beautiful wife." The deep voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Though I wonder if he knows how ugliness can hide behind a pretty face." Sarah turned toward the voice. A man sat atop a magnificent black horse at the edge of the square, his features shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Even from a distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze. "Mr. Carter," Mrs. Whitaker's voice had turned syrupy sweet. "I was just explaining to this person that perhaps she'd be more comfortable elsewhere. Is that so?" The man, Mr. Carter, dismounted with fluid grace. He crossed to where Sarah stood, deliberately picking up her scattered vegetables and placing them in his own hat, since her basket lay in ruins. "Strange. I thought Adobe Wells prided itself on Christian charity." He turned to Sarah, and she caught her breath. His face was handsome in a weathered way, but it was his eyes that held her, deep brown and filled with something that might have been understanding. "James Carter, ma'am, Willow Creek Ranch. May I assist you with your purchases?" For a long moment, Sarah couldn't find her voice. Around them, the crowd shifted uncomfortably, and Mrs. Whittaker's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. Finally, Sarah straightened her spine. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. That would be very kind." As they walked away from the stunned onlookers, Sarah heard Mrs. Whittaker's indignant sputter behind them. For the first time since arriving in Adobe Wells, she felt something other than shame or fear. It felt, she realized with surprise, almost like hope. James Carter's leather work glove lay on the table between them at Mrs. Henderson's tea shop, worn smooth at the fingertips from years of ranch work. He'd removed it to drink his coffee, revealing hands that spoke of honest labor, strong and calloused, yet gentle as he'd helped Sarah gather her scattered purchases. "Mrs. Henderson," he said, nodding as the boarding house owner brought a fresh pot of coffee. "The recent improvements to your establishment look fine indeed." "Careful, Mr. Carter," Mrs. Henderson replied with a small smile. "People might discover you're not the rough-hewn rancher you pretend to be if you keep noticing things like new curtains." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Can't have that, can we?" He turned his attention back to Sarah, his expression growing serious. "Miss Mitchell, I hope you'll forgive my interference in the square. Sometimes Mrs. Whittaker needs reminding that she's not the queen of Adobe Wells, though she certainly acts the part." Sarah wrapped her hands around her teacup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "There's nothing to forgive, Mr. Carter, though I'm surprised anyone would risk Mrs. Whittaker's displeasure on my account." "Risk?" He raised an eyebrow. "Mrs. Whittaker's opinion matters very little to me, Miss Mitchell. I learned long ago that those who judge others most harshly often do so to hide their own fears and failings." Something in his tone made Sarah look up, really looking at him for the first time. His face was tanned from long days in the sun, lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he smiled more than his current serious expression might indicate. But there was something else there too, a depth of understanding that couldn't come from an easy life. "You speak from experience, Mr. Carter." "Perhaps." He picked up his glove, running his thumb along a worn seam. "War has a way of teaching a man what really matters, and what doesn't. You fought in the war between the states, Union cavalry." His eyes grew distant for a moment, saw enough of man's inhumanity to last several lifetimes, but also enough of courage and kindness to keep my faith in people. Most of them, anyway. Sarah touched her scar unconsciously. "I wish I shared your optimism." "It's not optimism, Miss Mitchell. It's choice." He leaned forward slightly. "Every morning we choose how we face the world, how we let others' opinions shape us, whether we let our scars, visible or not, define who we are. And what if the world won't let you forget them?" The words came out barely above a whisper. James was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those deep brown eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. "Then you show the world that there's more to you than what it chooses to see. That strength can be as beautiful as any unmarred face." Heat crept into Sarah's cheeks, but for once it wasn't from shame. "You have an unusual way of looking at things, Mr. Carter. Comes from spending too much time with horses," he said, his serious expression lightening. "They don't care what you look like, only how you treat them." He stood, settling his hat back on his head. "Speaking of which, I should return to the ranch. But Miss Mitchell..." "Yes, Willow Creek Ranch always needs good help. If you find Adobe Wells unsuitable, we have a position open for a housekeeper. The work's honest, if not easy, and no one there will care about anything except how well you do your job." Sarah blinked in surprise. "You'd offer me a position? Without references? Without knowing anything about me?" "I know enough." He touched the brim of his hat. "I know you faced down Augusta Whittaker with dignity when most would have fled. I know you speak your mind, but with grace. And I know that anyone who's survived what you have has strength worth more than any reference letter." He turned to go, then paused. "Think about it, Miss Mitchell. Willow Creek might not be as refined as Boston, but it's a place where a person can find their true worth. Good day to you both." After he left, Mrs. Henderson began clearing the cups with a knowing smile. Well, well, it seems James Carter hasn't lost his ability to surprise people. Sarah watched through the window as he mounted his horse, the animal. Responding to his touch with obvious trust and affection, does he often rescue strays, Mrs. Henderson? Only the ones worth rescuing, my dear. Only the ones worth rescuing. The ranch employment contract lay on Sarah's small writing desk, its crisp pages a stark contrast to the worn wood. Mr. Carter had sent it over that morning, proper and formal, despite their unconventional meeting. The terms were clearly stated. Room, board, and a fair monthly wage in exchange for managing the ranch house and its domestic affairs. Sarah traced the line where she would sign, remembering another contract she'd held recently. The marriage agreement with Mr. Peterson. That paper had promised security too, but at what cost to her dignity? A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in, Mrs. Henderson." The older woman entered, carrying a fresh pitcher of water for the wash basin. "Still contemplating Mr. Carter's offer, I see. Is it foolish?" Sarah turned from the desk. "To consider working at a remote ranch for a man I barely know." Mrs. Henderson set down the pitcher with deliberate care. "Foolish? Perhaps. But sometimes the bravest choices look foolish to others." She straightened a few items on the dresser, her movements purposeful. "You know, I came out here as a young widow 20 years ago. Everyone in my hometown said I was mad to leave Boston's and comforts for the Arizona territory. What made you do it? The same thing I see in your eyes when you look at that contract. The need to write my own story, not the one others would write for me." She paused, weighing her next words. "I've known James Carter for 15 years, watched him build Willow Creek from nothing. He's a good man, Sarah, not the kind who makes grand gestures or flowery speeches, but one whose word, once given, is as solid as the mountains." Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dusty street below. Two women crossed to. Avoid walking directly past the boarding house, their whispers carrying even through the glass. And his ranch hands, will they accept taking orders from someone like me? His foreman is a freed slave who fought alongside him in the war. His cook is Mexican. Half his hands are Pima Indians. Mrs. Henderson smiled. Willow Creek has always been a place for people who don't quite fit the town's narrow view of proper society. That's what concerns me. Sarah turned back to face her friend. "I don't want to be another of James Carter's charitable causes." "Charity?" Mrs. Henderson laughed softly. "My dear, I've never known James Carter to offer charity in his life. Value for value, that's his way. He's offering you this position because he sees your worth, not despite your scar, but perhaps because of how you carry it." Sarah touched the contract again, feeling the texture of the paper under her fingertips. "I'd have my own rooms. In the main house. The housekeeper's quarters are quite comfortable, I'm told. Private too, separate from the bunkhouse and the main family wing." Mrs. Henderson moved to stand beside her. "Sarah, look at me." She turned, meeting the older woman's kind eyes. "You came west for a fresh start. Perhaps this isn't the one. You imagined, but sometimes God's plans are better than our own." Mrs. Henderson squeezed her hand. "Whatever you decide, know that you'll always have a friend in Adobe Wells." Sarah picked up the pen, its weight suddenly significant in her hand. "Will you witness my signature?" "Of course, my dear." Mrs. Henderson's smile was warm with approval. "And then we'll need to see about getting you some proper riding clothes. Can't manage a ranch house without knowing how to ride." As Sarah signed her name with careful strokes, she felt something shift inside her, like a door opening to let in fresh air. This wasn't the future she'd imagined when she'd boarded that train in Boston, but perhaps that was for the best. She thought of James Carter's quiet strength, his understanding eyes, and the way he'd stood up to Mrs. Whitaker without hesitation. "There," she said, blotting the signature. "For better or worse, I'm now the housekeeper of Willow Creek Ranch." "For better, I think," Mrs. Henderson said softly. "Definitely for better." The old ranch ledger rested heavily in Sarah's lap as the wagon wound its way through the desert landscape. Its leather cover was cracked with age and use, the pages inside filled with neat columns of numbers and notes written in James Carter's steady hand. He'd given it to her before they left town, saying simply, "Best you know what you're getting into." "Watch for the willows up ahead," James said from beside her on the wagon seat. "That's how the ranch got its name. Underground spring feeds. Them year-round, same spring that waters our gardens and keeps the house cool even in summer." As they crested a small rise, Sarah caught her first glimpse of Willow Creek Ranch. A grove of willows marked the heart of the property, their graceful branches swaying in the morning breeze. Beyond them stood a sprawling adobe house, its walls the color of sun-baked clay, with deep porches wrapping around three sides. A bunkhouse and stable formed an L shape nearby, and beyond them stretched corrals and pastures where horses grazed. In the distance, "It's beautiful," she breathed, surprised by how much she meant it. There was a harmony to the place, the way the buildings seemed to grow naturally from the landscape rather than impose upon it. "Took 10 years to build it up from nothing." James guided the wagon toward the house. "Every adobe brick, every fence post has a story." A tall black man emerged from the stable, followed by a Mexican woman wiping her hands on an apron. "That's Marcus Washington, my foreman," James explained, "and Maria Delgado, our cook. Marcus has been with me since the war, and Maria's been keeping us all well fed for the past 5 years." The wagon rolled to a stop, and Marcus stepped forward to help with the horses. "Welcome to Willow Creek, Miss Mitchell," he said, his voice deep and measured. "Mr. Carter's told us good things about you." "Has he?" Sarah glanced at James, who was suddenly very interested in securing the wagon brake. Maria came forward, her round face creased in a warm smile. "Don't let these men intimidate you, señorita. They act tough, but they're all soft as fresh tortillas. Inside," she shot a knowing look at James, "especially El Patron here, though he pretends otherwise." "Maria," James warned, but there was affection in his tone. "Come, come," Maria continued, taking Sarah's arm. "I'll show you your rooms while these two pretend to be busy with the horses. You must be tired from the journey." Sarah followed Maria up the wide steps to the wraparound porch, noting the solid construction and swept planks. Through the front door, the interior opened into a large great room with a stone fireplace and comfortable, if plain, furnishings. Late morning light streamed through clean windows, highlighting the simple elegance of the space. "Through here," Maria guided her, "down a hallway to the east wing. Your rooms connect to the kitchen, convenient for managing the house. Mr. Carter had them freshly whitewashed and furnished for you." The housekeeper's quarters consisted of a sitting room and bedroom, both larger than Sarah had expected. Simple. Curtains framed the windows, and a desk in the sitting room held account books and household ledgers. A copper wash basin gleamed on a stand, and the bed was made up with crisp linens. "It's lovely," Sarah said, touched by the careful preparation. "Mr. Carter wanted everything just so." Maria's eyes twinkled. "He spent 3 days supervising the cleaning himself. Never seen him so particular, not even when his sister visits from California." Before Sarah could process this information, a commotion arose from the kitchen, the clatter of pans and a string of colorful Spanish that made Maria roll her eyes. "Aye, that will be Diego dropping things again. Come, you should meet the rest of the household while they're all curious enough to be in the kitchen at once." She patted Sarah's hand. "Don't worry about remembering all the names today. They'll give you time to learn." Sarah set the ranch ledger on her new desk, running her fingers over its worn cover. Inside were the stories of this place, written in numbers and brief notes. Soon, she would add her own entries to its pages, becoming part of the ongoing story of Willow Creek Ranch. "Miss Mitchell?" James appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. "Everything to your satisfaction?" "Yes," she said, and was surprised to find she meant it completely. "Everything is perfect." For just a moment, their eyes met, and Sarah saw something, warm and pleased in his expression, before he nodded and turned away. "Good. Welcome home, Miss Mitchell. Welcome home." The worn leather saddle creaked as Sarah ran her hands over its surface, feeling the years of use that had softened the leather to a buttery smoothness. Dawn was just breaking over Willow Creek Ranch, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. "This was my mother's saddle," James said quietly, adjusting the stirrup length. "She taught me to ride on it. Said a good saddle is like a good friend, reliable, comfortable, and gets better with age. It's beautiful," Sarah said, admiring the subtle tooling along the horn. "But are you sure something this precious is meant to be used?" James patted the dappled mare waiting patiently beside them. "Just like Sugar here, she's gentle but not too gentle. Won't take advantage of a beginner, but won't let you get sloppy either." Sarah eyed the horse warily. Though not as tall as James's black stallion, Sugar still seemed enormously high off the ground. "I'm not sure about this, Mr. Carter." "James," he corrected gently, "if we're going to be teaching you to ride, we might as well use first names. Now put your left foot in the stirrup. Yes, just like that." His hands were steady and sure as he helped her mount, supporting her elbow as she swung awkwardly into the saddle. For a moment she felt dizzyingly high, then the mare shifted slightly and Sarah grabbed the saddle horn. "Easy now." James's voice was calm, reassuring. "Sugar knows her job. Just sit straight and breathe. Feel how she moves under you." Sarah nodded, gradually releasing her death grip on the horn. The mare's movements were smooth, almost rhythmic. "She's so warm." James smiled, and Sarah caught her breath at how it transformed his usually serious face. "That's the first thing everyone notices. Now hold the reins like this. Not too tight. Think of it like holding a baby bird. Firm enough that it won't fall, gentle enough not to hurt it." The next hour passed in a blur of instruction and practice. James taught her how to signal Sugar to walk, stop, and turn, always staying close enough to catch her if needed. His patience seemed endless, his quiet praise making her sit a little straighter each time she managed a new skill. "You're a natural," he said, as she successfully completed a figure 8 at a walk. "Most beginners fight the horse's movement. You're learning to flow with it." "I had a good teacher," Sarah replied, then added daringly, "though I notice you haven't taught me how to go any faster yet." James laughed, the sound rich and unexpected. "One step at a time, Miss Mitchell, one step at a time." "Sarah," she corrected, surprising herself, "if we're using first names." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Then Sugar snorted and shifted, breaking the moment. "Well then, Sarah," James said, his voice slightly rough, "shall we practice your turns again?" As the sun climbed higher, Sarah found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the lesson. The world looked different from horseback, bigger somehow, more full of possibility. When they finally stopped for a rest near the willow grove, she was reluctant to dismount. "The first ride is always the hardest," James said, helping her down. Her legs felt oddly wobbly, and his hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "And the most memorable. I'll certainly remember being sore," Sarah said ruefully, stretching her back. "Worth it, though." There was something in his tone that made her look up. James was watching her with an intensity that made her heart skip. "Yes," she said softly, "very much worth it." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good, because there's something about learning to ride that changes a person, gives them confidence, shows them they're capable of more than they thought." "Is that why you offered to teach me? To give me confidence?" James was quiet for a moment, leading Sugar toward the shade of the willows. "I offered because you needed to learn for practical reasons, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy seeing you discover your own strength." Sarah touched her scar unconsciously, an old habit. "Most people see only weakness when they look at me." "Most people," James said, turning to face her, "are fools who wouldn't know true strength if it rode up and introduced itself." His eyes were serious now, intent. "You survived something that would have broken many. You came west alone, faced rejection and cruelty, and still held your head high. That's not weakness, Sarah. That's the kind of strength that builds empires. The morning breeze stirred the willow branches, their leaves whispering secrets above them. Sarah felt something shift inside her, like a key turning in a long-locked door. "Thank you," she whispered. "Not just for the riding lesson." "You're welcome," he replied simply. "Same time tomorrow?" Sarah smiled, really smiled, for what felt like the first time in years. "Same time tomorrow." Sarah wound the braided horsehair through her fingers as she watched James in the round corral. The morning sun cast long shadows through the fence. Rails, and in the center man and horse moved in a careful dance of approach and retreat. The Mustang was a striking creature, copper-colored with a black mane, its every movement speaking of barely contained power and wary dignity. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Marcus stood at the rail beside Sarah, his dark eyes following the horse's movements. "James has been working with her for 2 weeks now. Found her caught in barbed wire, half dead from infection. Most would have put her down, but James saw something worth saving," Sarah finished softly. Marcus nodded. "He's got a way of seeing past surface wounds to what lies beneath." In the corral, James moved with deliberate slowness, his body language relaxed but purposeful. The Mustang watched him with pricked ears, nostrils flaring as she caught his scent. She bore a long scar down her flank, still visible through her growing coat. "Easy now, lady." James's voice carried clearly in the morning air. "No one here's going to hurt you." The mare snorted, tossing her head, but didn't bolt when James took another step closer. Sarah found herself holding her breath, recognizing something of herself in the horse's cautious acceptance. "The trick," James said, not taking his eyes off the Mustang, "is to let them come to you. You can't force trust. You can only prove day after day that you're worthy of it." Sarah wasn't sure if he was talking to her or the horse, perhaps both. "Watch now," Marcus murmured. "This is where the real work happens." James had stopped moving, standing quietly with one hand extended, palm up. The Mustangs circled him, each, past bringing her slightly closer. Her ears flicked back and forth, reading his intentions in the set of his shoulders, the steadiness of his stance. "That's it," James said softly. "You decide. Your choice, lady. Always your choice." The mare stopped circling, focusing intently on James's outstretched hand. For a long moment nothing moved except the morning breeze stirring dust motes in, the sunlight. Then, with infinite caution, she stretched her neck forward, velvet nostrils brushing his palm. "There now," James breathed. "There now." Sarah realized she had tears in her eyes. Marcus pressed a clean handkerchief into her palm without comment. "Remarkable, isn't it?" he said after a moment, "how he never loses patience, never pushes harder than they're ready for. Seen him spend months gentling horses others would have, given up on in a week." "How does he know?" Sarah asked. "When to push and when to wait?" Marcus smiled. "He says you have to listen with your whole self, not just your ears, but your heart too. Horses don't lie, don't pretend to be something. They're not. They'll tell you what they need if you're willing to hear it." In the corral, James was now running his hand along the Mustang's neck, speaking to her in a low, steady voice. The mare's eyes were half closed, years of wildness and fear melting under his gentle touch. "She'll need a name," James called over. "To them. Any suggestions?" Sarah looked at the copper-colored mare with her battle scars and proud bearing. "Phoenix," she said without hesitation, "because she rose from the ashes." James's eyes met hers over the horse's back, and something unspoken passed between them. "Phoenix," he repeated. "Yes, that fits her perfectly." The mare nudged his chest with her nose, leaving a dusty print on his shirt. James laughed, the sound pure with simple joy. "See that? Already getting pushy. Give them an inch of trust and they'll take a mile." "Is that such a bad thing?" Sarah asked. "No," James said softly, still stroking Phoenix's neck. "No, sometimes taking that mile is exactly what they need to do. Sometimes it's the only way to learn that freedom doesn't have to mean being alone." Sarah touched her scar, feeling its familiar ridges beneath her fingertips. The braided horsehair in her other hand was soft, strong, like the mare who'd donated it, like the man who'd shown her that healing was possible. "She'll always bear the scars," James said, as if reading her thoughts. "But scars are just proof that we survived. It's what we do after the healing that defines us." Phoenix chose that moment to pull away, moving to the far side of the corral. But there was no fear in her retreat now, only the natural ebb and flow of trust being built one moment at a time. "Same time tomorrow, lady?" James asked the mare. She nickered softly in response, and Sarah felt an answering warmth in her chest. Some things couldn't be rushed, couldn't be forced, but with patience and understanding, even the wildest heart could learn to trust again. The newspaper rustled in Maria's hands as she slapped it down on the kitchen table, her usually cheerful face dark with anger. "Have you seen this, señorita?" She jabbed her finger at a column of social notes. "What that Bruja Whitaker wrote about you and El Patron." Sarah picked up the paper, her heart sinking as she read the carefully worded poison penned in Mrs. Whitaker's weekly society column. Concerned citizens have noted with alarm the recent domestic arrangements at Willow Creek Ranch, where a certain scarred female of questionable background has taken up residence. While Mr. James Carter's charitable nature is well known, one must question the wisdom and propriety of housing an unmarried woman of such character in his household. Perhaps our esteemed rancher's isolation has clouded his normally impeccable judgment. The words blurred before Sarah's eyes, but she forced herself to continue reading. Those who value the moral fabric of our community might do well to remind Mr. Carter that a man in his position, with significant business interests and a responsibility to uphold proper standards, should exercise more discretion in his choice of household staff. One can only hope that his sister, the respected Mrs. Eleanor Stanford of San Francisco, will offer guidance during her upcoming visit. "Basura!" Maria snatched the paper back, crumpling it in her capable hands. "Mrs. Whitaker wouldn't know. Proper behavior if it served her tea. You've done nothing wrong, Nina. Haven't I?" Sarah sank into a kitchen chair. "By accepting this position, I've exposed James to gossip and criticism. Perhaps I should—" "Don't you dare finish that thought." Maria's voice was stern. "Running away would only prove them right about everything they've said about you. Besides," her expression softened, "it would break his heart." "Maria, no, listen to me. I've worked for James Carter for 5 years. In all that time, I've never seen him as alive as he's been these past weeks. The way he looks at you when you're not watching." She shook her head. "A man doesn't look at his housekeeper that way, Nina." Before Sarah could respond, steps sounded on the back porch. James entered, his expression thunderous. "I see you've read the paper." "James, I'm so sorry. I never meant—" "Stop." He held up a hand. "You have nothing to apologize for. Augusta Whitaker has appointed herself the moral guardian of Adobe Wells, but her opinion matters less to me than last year's dust. But your reputation—" "My reputation?" He gave a short laugh. "Sarah, I employed a black man as my foreman, when half the territory would have refused him service in their stores. I hired Mexican vaqueros and Indian workers when respectable ranchers wouldn't. I've never cared what Adobe Wells thinks of my choices, and I'm not about to start now." Maria quietly slipped out of the kitchen, leaving them alone. James pulled out a chair, sitting close enough that Sarah could smell leather and sage on his clothes. "What concerns me," he said more gently, "is how this affects you. I know you've worked hard to build a life here, to earn respect on your own terms. If our association is making that harder—" "No." The word came out more forcefully than she'd intended. "I mean, yes, the gossip is difficult, but here at Willow Creek, I've found something I never had before. Acceptance, purpose. I won't let Mrs. Whitaker take that away." James reached across the table, his calloused hand covering hers. Good, because I've grown rather accustomed to seeing you at breakfast. The warmth of his touch sent tingles up her arm. Only at breakfast. His eyes darkened, and for a moment Sarah thought he might say more. Then the screen door banged open and Marcus strode in, looking worried. "Boss, got word from town. Your sister's stage is due in tomorrow, not next week like we thought, and—" He hesitated, glancing at Sarah. "And," James prompted, "and Mrs. Whitaker was at the depot when the mail came in. She's already making plans for a welcome dinner for Mrs. Stanford. Seems to think your sister might want to address certain situations at the ranch." James muttered something under his breath that made Maria, who had returned with fresh coffee, cross herself. Eleanor. Of course. Augusta would try to recruit her. He turned to Sarah. "My sister is complicated, strong-willed, but she's not cruel, just protective. Of you, or of the family name. Both, probably." He stood, running a hand through his hair. "I should ride into town, try to head off whatever scheme Augusta's cooking up. Will you be all right here?" Sarah straightened her spine. "I'm not made of glass, James. I won't break because of a few cruel words in a newspaper." His expression softened as he looked at her. "No, you won't. You're stronger than all of them put together." He touched her shoulder briefly as he passed. "We'll weather this storm, Sarah, together." After he left, Maria set a cup of coffee in front of Sarah. "Well, Nina, ready to face the Dragon of San Francisco?" Sarah picked up the crumpled newspaper, smoothing it flat. "You know what, Maria? I believe I am." The lightning-struck tree smoldered in the distance, its split trunk a stark reminder of nature's power. Sarah pulled her oilskin coat tighter as thunder rolled across Willow Creek Ranch. The afternoon sky had turned an ominous shade of green-black, and the wind carried the sharp scent of rain and electricity. "Miss Sarah," Marcus's voice cut through. "The rising wind. Mr. Carter needs you at the south pasture. Storms driving the new herd toward the wash. If we don't turn them, we'll lose half our stock." Sarah was already moving toward the stable. "What about his sister's arrival? Stage won't run in this weather. Mrs. Stanford's stuck in Tucson till it passes." Marcus helped her saddle Sugar with practiced efficiency. "You sure about this? It's going to get rough out there." "I'm sure." 3 months of daily riding had given her confidence she'd never imagined possible. "Which way?" "Follow the lightning-struck oak to the south fence line. Mr. Carter's there with Diego and the others." He squeezed her arm. "Be careful, miss. Sarah, these summer storms can turn deadly quick." Sugar seemed to sense the urgency, moving out smartly as soon as they cleared the stable yard. The wind whipped Sarah's skirts. She'd never been more grateful for the split riding skirt Maria had altered for her. Around them, the desert held its breath in that eerie stillness that preceded a major storm. She heard the cattle before she saw them. The nervous lowing of hundreds of animals crowded together, smelling the approaching storm. Then she crested a small rise and saw the scope of their problem. The new herd, still skittish from the drive up from Mexico, was bunched tight against the fence line. Beyond them lay the wash, normally dry but soon to become a raging torrent. When the storm hit, "Sarah!" James's voice carried over the wind. He rode toward her, his black stallion dancing beneath him. "What are you doing out here?" "Marcus said you needed help." Another flash of lightning, closer now, illuminated his face, concern warring with something else in his expression. "It's not safe," he began, but she cut him off. "I can ride, James. You taught me yourself. Now tell me what you need." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Stubborn woman." But there was admiration in his voice. "All right, we need to turn them north, away from the wash. Diego and the others are trying to shift the rear of the herd, but they're fighting us. If we can get a few leaders moving the right direction, the rest will follow," she finished. "Like Phoenix in the Round Corral. They just need someone to show them the way." Thunder crashed overhead, and the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. James nodded sharply. "Stay close to me. We'll work in tandem, pressure and release, just like with the Mustang." They rode together toward the milling herd, their horses moving in sync. Sarah felt an odd calm settle over her despite the chaos. of the storm. This was what James had been teaching her all along, not just how to ride, but how to trust herself, how to read situations and respond with confidence. The next hour passed in a blur of rain and motion. They worked the herd steadily, Sarah following James's lead, but also acting on her own instincts when opportunities arose. Gradually, the cattle began to turn, moving away from the dangerous, washed toward safer ground. Then lightning struck again, impossibly close. Sugar reared, more from surprise than fear, but Sarah was ready. She rode out the motion just as James had taught her, maintaining her seat. But she saw his face in that brilliant flash, saw raw fear there as he reached for her. "Sarah, I'm fine!" She brought Sugar back under control, rain streaming down her face. "I'm fine, James." The last of the herd was moving north now, following. The leaders they'd turned earlier. They could hear Diego's whoops of triumph carried on the wind. James rode close, his hand shooting out to grasp her reins. "When I saw you go up," his voice was rough with emotion, "you taught me well." Sarah was suddenly very aware of how close they were, of how his hand had moved from her reins to her arm. "When Marcus said you'd ridden out," he shook his head. "Sarah, if anything happened to you." But it didn't. She reached out, touching his cheek with a shaking hand. "I'm here. We're both here." Lightning flashed again, but neither of them looked away. James's hand slid up her arm to cup her face, his thumb brushing her scar with infinite tenderness. Sarah felt herself leaning toward him, drawn by something more powerful than the storm around them. Their lips were inches apart when the first peal of thunder broke over them. Sugar jumped, breaking the moment, and they both laughed shakily. "We should get back," James said, but his eyes told a different story. "Before this gets worse." "Yes," Sarah agreed, though part of her wanted to stay in this moment forever, rain-soaked and alive with possibility. "We should." They rode back, together through the storm. But something had changed between them, something as electric as the lightning and as inevitable as the thunder that followed. And Sarah knew, with sudden clarity, that there would be no going back to the way things were before. The military medal caught the lamplight as Sarah lifted it from the wooden box, its brass surface dulled with age, but still bearing the clear inscription, "For gallantry in action." She hadn't meant to find it. She'd been searching the library for the ranch's old tax records when the box had slipped from a high shelf, spilling its contents across the desk. "That was Antietam." James's quiet voice from the doorway made her start. "The day everything changed." "James, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry." She tried to return the medal to its box, but he crossed the room and caught her hand, the medal between their palms. "It's all right." His voice was gentle. "Maybe it's time someone knew the whole story." He released her hand and moved to the window, staring out at the night sky. "I was 22, a captain in the Union Cavalry. Thought I knew everything there was to know about honor and courage." His laugh was soft, bitter. "I didn't know anything." Sarah set the medal down carefully but kept silent, sensing he needed to tell this story in his own way. "We were supposed to hold a strategic bridge. My men, boys really, most of them younger than me, trusted me to make the right decisions. The morning was chaos, smoke everywhere. Couldn't tell friend from foe." He touched his left side unconsciously. "Confederate artillery opened up and I had to choose. Hold the position as ordered or pull back to save my men." "Oh, what did you do?" "I chose my men." He turned to face her, and in the lamplight she could see old pain in his eyes. "Disobeyed a direct order. Pulled them back just before the bridge was blown to pieces. Saved 37 lives that day. And they gave you a medal for it?" "The medal came later, after they realized my decision had accidentally revealed a Confederate flanking maneuver. They called it tactical genius." His voice turned harsh. "It wasn't genius. It was just trying to keep more young men from dying needlessly." Sarah moved closer, drawn by the pain in his voice. "You carry it still, don't you? The weight of that choice." "Every day." He looked down at his hands. "But that's not what changed. Me. It was afterward in the field hospital. Slowly, deliberately, he unbuttoned his shirt, revealing a mass of scar tissue along his left side. Grape shot. Doctor said I'd never ride again. Sarah's hand moved of its own accord, fingers hovering over the scarred flesh. But you proved them wrong. Had to. Riding was all I knew. He caught her hand, pressing it gently against his scars. Took 2 years of fighting through pain every day, learning to trust my body again. That's when I learned that healing isn't just about the body. It's about the spirit, too. The rough texture of his scars felt familiar under her fingers, like a language she could read. Is that why you're so patient with Phoenix? With me? I recognize something in both of you. His other hand came up to trace her cheek, following the line of her scar. The same spirit that refuses to be defined by scars. The same courage it takes to trust again after being hurt. James. Her voice wavered as his fingers lingered on her face. When I first saw you in the market square, he continued softly, standing up to Augusta Whitaker with your head high, I recognized that look in your eyes, the one that says the world can knock you down, but it can't keep you there. I was terrified that day, but you stood your ground anyway. That's real. Courage, Sarah, not fearlessness. God knows I was never fearless, but feeling the fear and choosing to be stronger than it. They stood close now, his hand still cradling her face, hers pressed against his scarred side. The library was quiet except for the soft ticking of the clock and their uneven breathing. Does it still hurt? She whispered, meaning his old wound. Sometimes in the cold, when it rains. His thumb brushed her lower lip. But some scars are worth the pain they bring. They remind us of what we've survived, what we've learned, and what have you learned? Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he must feel it. That the most beautiful things in life are often the ones that have been broken and mended. He leaned down, his forehead touching hers. That sometimes what looks like an ending is really a beginning in disguise. When their lips finally met, it was gentle, a kiss between two people who understood that healing was a journey, not a destination. Sarah felt years of pain and loneliness melting away under the tender pressure of his mouth, replaced by something warm and bright and full of promise. When they finally parted, James kept her close, his arms strong around her. The medal lay forgotten on the desk, its tarnished surface reflecting the lamplight like a distant memory of pain transformed into something precious. The dance card dangled from Sarah's wrist, its silk ribbon matching the pale blue of her new dress. The town square had been transformed for Adobe Wells's summer festival. Lanterns, strung between the buildings, cast a warm glow over the gathering crowd, and the sound of fiddles tuning up filled the evening air. You look beautiful, James said softly, helping her down from the wagon. He was dressed in his best clothes, his usually wind-blown hair neatly combed, though a stubborn cowlick still curled at his temple. You're biased, she replied, but squeezed his hand in thanks. Biased, perhaps, but also right. His eyes held a warmth that made her cheeks flush. Shall we? They'd barely taken 2 steps when Mrs. Whitaker's voice cut through the festival noise. James Carter, how lovely to see you at a social event for once. She bore down on them like a battleship under full sail, her silk dress rustling. And with your housekeeper. The pause before the last word was deliberate, meant to wound. But Sarah felt only the steady pressure of James's hand at her waist, grounding her. Good evening, Augusta, James said pleasantly. Sarah and I are looking forward to the dancing. I hear your nephew's band is playing. Yes, though I'm sure some of us are more accustomed to such refined entertainment than others. Her eyes raked over Sarah's dress. How brave of you to attend, Miss Mitchell, especially after that unfortunate business with Mr. Peterson. Before Sarah could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. Jimmy, you actually came! A tall man in an expensive suit approached, grinning. I told Augusta you would, but she didn't believe me. Tom! James's smile was genuine as he shook the man's hand. Sarah, this is Tom Whitaker, Augusta's better half. Tom, Miss Sarah Mitchell. The famous Miss Mitchell! Tom's handshake was warm and firm. I've heard so much about you. All good things from Jimmy here, though my wife seems to have a different opinion. He winked at Sarah. But then Augusta's never forgiven Jimmy for choosing ranching over law practice. Thomas, Mrs. Whittaker's face had turned an interesting shade of purple. I hardly think— Now, my dear, Tom patted his wife's hand. Let's not spoil the evening with old grievances. Miss Mitchell, may I have the honor of the second dance, after Jimmy has the first, of course. Sarah found herself smiling. Despite Mrs. Whittaker's obvious displeasure, I'd be delighted, Mr. Whittaker. As they moved away from the sputtering Augusta, Sarah heard Tom say, Come along, my dear. The Hendersons just arrived. I'm sure you'd rather discuss the church social with Eleanor than watch your nephew's band murder another Virginia reel. Tom Whittaker, James explained as they joined the dance line, has been managing his wife's temper for 30 years. He makes it look easy. The music started, and Sarah discovered that James danced as well as he rode, with natural grace and quiet confidence. As they moved through the figures of the dance, she became aware of the watching eyes, the whispered conversations. They're all staring, she murmured during a promenade. Let them! His hand tightened on hers. They're just jealous that I'm dancing with the most beautiful woman here. James Carter, you're becoming quite the flatterer. Not flattery, just truth. The dance brought them face to face, and his expression grew serious. Sarah, I need to tell you something. But the music ended, and Tom Whittaker appeared to claim his dance. The evening whirled by in a blur of music and motion. Sarah danced with Tom, with Marcus, even with old Mr. Martinez, who told her in confidential tones that her tomato plants were coming along nicely. It was during a break between sets that she saw him, Mr. Peterson, standing near the refreshment table with a pretty young woman on his arm. He saw her too, his face flushing as he quickly looked away. Sarah? James's voice was concerned. We can leave if you'd like. She squared her shoulders. No. I think I'd like another dance with you, Mr. Carter. His smile was proud as he led her back to the dance floor. This time it was a waltz, and as they moved together, Sarah realized she no longer cared who was watching. Let them see, let them whisper. She was tired of hiding, tired of shame. You're magnificent, James murmured as they turned. Do you know that? The way you hold your head high, the way you refuse to let them dim your light. It's easier with you beside me. Then I'll stay beside you, if you'll have me. The music swelled around them, and Sarah felt something shift in her heart, like a door opening, like wings spreading. Yes, she said simply. Yes, I'll have you. His arms tightened around her, and right there in the middle of the dance floor, in front of all of Adobe Wells' finest citizens, James Carter bent and kissed her. The music stuttered for a moment as the fiddler missed a note in surprise, then resumed with renewed vigor. When they parted, Sarah was aware of the shocked silence around them, broken by Tom Whittaker's delighted laugh, and what sounded suspiciously like Mrs. Henderson's, "Well, it's about time." "Well," James said, his eyes twinkling, "I suppose that takes care of the gossip about whether I'm serious about my housekeeper." Sarah couldn't help it. She laughed, the sound bright and free as the music that carried them through the rest. Of the dance, the unique engagement ring had belonged to James's grandmother, a simple gold band set with 3 small sapphires that caught the morning light as Eleanor Stanford turned it over in her manicured hands. Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway as James's sister examined the family heirloom, her expression unreadable. Mother's ring. Eleanor's voice was cool, controlled. I wondered where it had gone when Father died. So this is why you asked me to bring it from San Francisco? Yes. James stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel. I think Grandmother would have approved of my choice. Would she? Eleanor set the ring down carefully. A woman with no family, no connections, hired as your housekeeper. Really, James, what are you thinking? I'm thinking that I love her. The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Love. Eleanor laughed softly. Dear brother, This isn't one of your rescued horses that you can heal with patience and kind words. This is your life, our family's reputation. Eleanor. No, you need to hear this. She stood, her silk skirts rustling. I've spent years rebuilding our family's standing in San Francisco society after you chose to become a rancher. I've smoothed ruffled feathers, made the right connections, ensured that despite your eccentric choices, the Carter name still means something. And you think Sarah would damage that precious reputation? I think she already has. Eleanor's voice sharpened. Do you know what they're saying in Adobe Wells? What Mrs. Whitaker wrote to me? A scarred woman of mysterious background, living unchaperoned in your home, and now you're seen kissing her at public gatherings? Sarah's hands clenched in her skirts, but she forced herself to remain silent, unseen. What they're saying doesn't concern me. James's voice was quiet but firm. It should. The bank's board of directors is meeting next month to consider your loan application for expanding the ranch. Do you think they'll look favorably on this situation? If they judge my business acumen by whom I choose to love, they're not bankers I wish to deal with. Eleanor sighed, a sound of genuine frustration. This isn't about love, James. It's about responsibility, position, the obligations that come with our name. No. James turned to face his sister fully. This is about fear. Your fear of what others might think. Your fear of losing control. Of the narrative you've so carefully constructed. I'm trying to protect you. I don't need protection. What I need is my sister's support. He picked up the ring, its sapphires gleaming. Sarah makes me happy, Eleanor, truly happy, in a way I haven't been since before the war. She sees me, not the Carter name, not the ranch owner, just me. And what about children? Eleanor's voice was barely above a whisper. Have you thought about that? Would you subject your own flesh and blood to the stares, the whispers, every time their mother appears in public? Sarah couldn't bear it anymore. She stepped into the room, her footsteps causing both siblings to turn. You don't need to worry about that, Mrs. Stanford. Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. I won't accept the ring. Sarah, no. James started toward her, but she held up a hand. Your sister is right about one thing. The Carter name does mean something. It opens doors, creates opportunities. I won't be the reason those doors close. To hell with the doors. James crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. To hell with all of it. The only opportunity I care about is the chance to spend my life with you. James, please. Sarah gently extracted her hands from his. You have responsibilities. The ranch. Your workers who depend on you. If the bank denies that loan because of me, then we'll find another way. Sarah, look at me. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Nothing matters more to me than you. Not the family name, not society's approval, not even the ranch. Everything you've built can be rebuilt. But a love like ours, that's rare as desert rain and twice as precious. Eleanor made a small sound, drawing their attention. She was watching them with an odd expression, something between resignation and revelation. You really do love her, she said softly. This isn't some infatuation or misplaced chivalry. You love her. With all that I am, James replied, not looking away from Sarah's eyes. The only question is, will my sister stand with us or against us? The family portrait hung in the dining room like a silent judge. Generations of Carters gazing down at the tension-filled table below. Sarah had seen it every day for months without truly studying it. But now she couldn't help noticing how the lamplight caught the stern features of James's father, the gentle smile of his mother, the childhood innocence in young Eleanor's face. The quail is excellent, Miss Mitchell. Eleanor's voice broke the stilted silence. I see you've mastered Maria's recipes. Actually, James said before Sarah could respond, this is Sarah's own recipe. She's quite accomplished in the kitchen, among her many other talents. James, Sarah's quiet voice held a warning. She wouldn't be the cause of more friction between brother and sister. No, he's right. Eleanor set down her fork. I apologize, Miss Mitchell. That was patronizing of me. The unexpected admission hung in the air until Marcus entered with a message for James. Telegram from the bank in Tucson, sir. Marked urgent. James read it quickly, his expression darkening. It seems our discussion about the loan wasn't theoretical after all, Eleanor. The board's moved up their meeting. They want to see me, us, tomorrow. Us? Sarah asked. The entire Carter family? Eleanor's lips twisted. Including, I assume, any prospective additions to it. I won't go. Sarah's voice was firm. Your sister's right, James. The bank needs to see the James Carter they expect. The responsible rancher, the businessman, the proper society gentleman. James's laugh was bitter. That's not who I am, Sarah. That's not who I've been since Antietam. Antietam? Eleanor's fork clattered against her plate. What does that have to do with anything? James stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. Without a word, he unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the mass of scar tissue that Sarah had come to know so well. This is who I am, Eleanor. A man who chose his men's lives over orders, who spent 2 years learning to walk, to ride again, who built this ranch not because of our family name, but in spite of it. Eleanor had gone pale, one hand pressed to her mouth. I didn't know. Father said you were wounded, but Father was too ashamed to admit that his son had disobeyed orders, even though they gave me a medal for it later. Too proud to acknowledge that his heir came back from war changed, inside and out. James's voice softened. That's why I understand Sarah, why I love her. We both know what it means to be marked by life, to have the world see only our scars and miss the strength beneath them. James, Sarah stood, moving to his side. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. I'm tired of hiding who we are, what we mean to each other. I'm tired of watching you dim your light to make others comfortable. But the loan can go hang. He turned to Eleanor, who sat stunned in her chair. You've spent years protecting the family name, sister. But what good is a name without honor, without love? Eleanor stood slowly, her eyes moving from James's scars to Sarah's face and back again. I was 12 when you went to war, she said softly. I remember Mother crying when your letters came, Father pacing in his study. But I never knew. You never told me. How could I? James's voice was gentle now. You were so young, and later it seemed easier to let you believe what you wanted about why I chose the ranch over San Francisco. And now? Sarah asked quietly. What do you choose now? James looked at her, his eyes full of the same tenderness she'd seen that day. In the library. I choose you, the ranch, this life we could build together. I choose truth over appearance, love over obligation. He turned back to Eleanor. The only question is, what do you choose, sister? Eleanor walked to the portrait, studying it for a long moment. Then she turned and Sarah saw tears in her eyes. I choose my brother, the real one, not the image I've tried to preserve all these years. She moved to James, touching his scarred side with trembling fingers. I'm so sorry, Jimmy. I've been so blind. We all have our scars, Eleanor. Some are just more visible than others. Eleanor wiped her eyes, then squared her shoulders, a gesture so like her brother's that Sarah's heart ached. Well then, shall we discuss how to convince the bank that innovation and unconventional thinking are exactly what the territory needs? Eleanor, James's voice held a question. If they can't see that a man who built all this from nothing is worth investing in, then they're fools. She smiled suddenly, transforming her severe features. Besides, I've always enjoyed a good fight, especially when it's for something that matters. Sarah felt James's arms slip around her waist, drawing her close. Above them, the family portrait watched as the three of them began to plan, its stern faces softened by the warm lamplight and the sound of renewed hope in their laughter. The deed to Willow Creek Ranch lay unfolded on James's desk, its official seals gleaming in the morning light. Sarah traced the elaborate script with her finger, reading the familiar words. James Alexander Carter, sole proprietor. Sign here, the bank president said, pushing another document across the desk. Once you've transferred the ranch to the family trust, we can proceed with the loan. James picked up the pen, then set it down again. And if I don't? James. Eleanor's warning tone came from behind him. We discussed this. No, Eleanor. You discussed it. The board discussed it. Everyone seems to have an opinion about what I should do with my ranch. He stood, moving to the window where Sarah stood. Except the one person whose opinion matters most to me. Sarah shook her head. James, don't. This is your legacy, your family's future. You're my future. He took her hands in his. The ranch. The Carter name, they're just things. Important things, yes, but not as important as what we could build together. The bank president cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, perhaps we should continue this discussion in private. No. James's voice was firm. No more private discussions, no more compromises. I built this ranch from nothing once. I can do it again, if I have to. But you don't have to. Sarah's voice caught. I won't let you sacrifice everything you've worked for. Sacrifice. He touched her scarred cheek gently. The only sacrifice would be letting fear of what others think drive away the best thing that's ever happened to me. Eleanor moved to stand beside them. James, the board won't approve the loan without the trust agreement. They need guarantees, security. Then they can keep their money. He turned to face the room. I came to Arizona Territory with nothing but determination and a bad leg. Built this ranch 1 acre at a time, 1 horse at a time. Did it my way, with people society said weren't good enough. A black foreman, Mexican vaqueros, Indian workers. And you know what? We succeeded because of our differences, not in spite of them. The bank president frowned. The issue isn't your workers, Mr. Carter. It's the unusual nature of your personal arrangements. You mean my intention to marry? Sarah? James's voice was dangerously quiet. A woman who's shown more courage, more dignity, more true nobility than all your society ladies combined. James. Sarah squeezed his hand. Please don't. No. They need to hear this. Need to understand. He faced the bankers squarely. I was nobody when I came here. Just another broken soldier with impossible dreams. But I built something real, something that matters. Not because of my family name, but because I wasn't afraid to trust people others overlooked, to see the strength in them that society missed. And Miss Mitchell, one of the board members asked, what strength do you see in her? I see a woman who survived tragedy with her spirit intact, who faced cruelty with grace, who makes everyone around her better just by believing in them. James's voice softened. I see the love of my life, and I don't care if that costs me every penny I own. Silence fell over the room. Then Eleanor stepped forward, pulling something from her reticule. Well, if you're determined to be dramatic about it, you might as well do it properly. She pressed their grandmother's ring into his hand. Go on, Jimmy. Some things matter more than money. James stared at the ring, then at his sister. Eleanor? Oh, don't look so surprised. She smiled, though her eyes were bright with tears. You're not the only one who can learn to see what really matters. The bank president stood, gathering his papers. Mr. Carter, if you proceed with this action, we cannot actually. Eleanor interrupted smoothly. I believe you can, because if you don't approve my brother's loan, I'll be withdrawing all of the Carter family investments from your institution. All of them. Mrs. Stanford. And I suspect, she continued, that Tom Whitaker and his friends on the board might be interested in hearing about your attempt to dictate the personal lives of your clients. Tom's quite progressive about such things, you know. The bankers huddled together, whispered frantically. James barely seemed to notice. He had eyes only for Sarah. Well? He asked softly, holding up the ring. What do you say? Want to scandalize Adobe Wells properly? Sarah looked at the ring, at James's hopeful face, at Eleanor's encouraging smile. She thought of all the paths that had led her here, The fire that scarred her, the letter that brought her west, the cruelty that led her to Willow Creek Ranch. Every step, every scar, every tear had been leading her to this moment. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." As James slipped the ring onto her finger, as Eleanor dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, as the bankers shuffled uncomfortably in the background, Sarah felt the last walls around her heart crumble. Here was home. Here was healing. Here was love. The wedding invitation sat propped on Mrs. Whittaker's mantle, its elegant calligraphy a silent rebuke to all her previous condemnation. She picked it up for the 4th time that morning, running her fingers over the raised letters that proclaimed, "James Alexander Carter and Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell request the honor of your presence." Still trying to find fault with it, my dear. Tom Whittaker's amused voice came from his armchair. "The paper's certainly fine enough. Eleanor Stanford saw to that. And Sarah's penmanship is exceptional." "It's not that." Augusta sank into her chair, the invitation still in her hands. "It's... Tom, were we wrong about her?" "We?" His eyebrows rose. "I seem to recall taking quite a shine to the girl at the festival." "Oh, you know what I mean." She smoothed her skirts nervously. "The things I wrote, the things I said, I was so sure I was protecting our town's standards." "Standards?" Tom set aside his newspaper. "Like the standards that said Marcus Washington couldn't possibly be a competent foreman? Or that Maria's cooking wasn't refined enough for proper society?" He smiled gently. "My dear, you've been fighting progress since the day I met you. Maybe it's time to stop fighting and start seeing people for who they really are." Before Augusta could respond, a commotion arose from the street. Sarah Mitchell was walking past their house, but she wasn't alone. Eleanor Stanford walked beside her, both women carrying fabric samples and laughing together like old friends. "She's changed," Augusta murmured, watching through the window. "Not her scar, that's the same, but the way she carries herself." "Love does that," Tom said quietly. "The right kind of love, anyway, makes people stand taller, shine brighter." The door chimed, and their maid announced Mrs. Henderson. The boarding house owner swept in, her arms full of flower samples. "Augusta?" "Good. You're home. We need your eye for the wedding decorations. Nobody knows more about proper flower arrangements than you do." "Me?" Augusta blinked in surprise. "But surely Mrs. Stanford. Eleanor's handling the music and the dinner service." Mrs. Henderson said briskly, "But Sarah specifically asked for your help with the flowers. Said something about how the arrangements you did for last year's church social were the most beautiful she'd ever seen. She noticed that?" "Of course she did. That girl notices everything, especially people's talents." Mrs. Henderson's eyes twinkled, "Rather like how she noticed that your Thomas has been helping James with the bank negotiations, even though you didn't want him involved." Augusta felt her cheeks warm. "Yes, well, come along then." Mrs. Henderson held out a sample of white roses. "The wedding's in 3 weeks and there's much to do. Sarah wants to combine traditional flowers with some of the desert blooms she's grown so fond of. Quite a challenge, but I told her if anyone could make it work." As Augusta found herself drawn into discussions of flower combinations and color schemes, she was aware of Tom watching her with that knowing smile of his. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps it was time to stop fighting change and start embracing it instead. Across town at Willow Creek Ranch, Sarah was showing Eleanor the latest wedding plans. "Mrs. Whittaker is a genius with flowers," she said enthusiastically. "And with her helping, maybe others in town will feel more comfortable attending," Eleanor finished. "Oh, they'll attend. Augusta Whittaker may have started the gossip, but she can end it too, especially now that she's personally involved in the planning." "Was that why you suggested asking her help?" Eleanor laughed. "Sarah, dear, that was all your idea. I just sat back and watched you work your magic." She touched Sarah's arm gently. "You know, when I first arrived, I thought I was coming to save my brother from a terrible mistake. Instead, I found him happier than I've seen him since before the war. Found myself a sister too, if you'll have me." Sarah hugged her impulsively. "I've never had a sister." "Well, you're getting one now, along with an entire town full of people who are finally beginning to see what James saw all along." From the kitchen, they could hear Maria directing the ranch hands who were helping move furniture to make room for the wedding feast. Marcus's deep laugh mingled with James's voice as they discussed where to set up the dancing area. "It's really happening, isn't it?" Sarah said softly. "Sometimes I still can't quite believe it." "Believe it." Eleanor squeezed her hand. "Love like yours and James's. That's the kind of love that changes not just two people, but a community. Just watch." As if to prove her point, they heard Augusta Whitaker's voice in the kitchen, directing the placement of test flower arrangements with the same enthusiasm she usually reserved for church socials. Sarah smiled, touching her grandmother's ring on her finger. Sometimes healing came in unexpected ways, touching not just one heart, but many. The hand-carved door sign read, "James and Sarah Carter," its letters deep and sure, carved by Marcus as a wedding gift. Sarah touched it gently as she prepared to enter the ranch house, now decorated for the ceremony. The morning sun caught the silver threads in Mrs. Henderson's hair as she adjusted Sarah's veil one last time. "There," the older woman said, her voice thick with emotion. "Perfect." Sarah turned to the mirror, not the tarnished one from her first days in Adobe Wells, but a new one, clear and true. Her scar was still there, of course, but somehow it looked different now. Less like a mark of tragedy, and more like a sign of survival, of strength. "Sarah?" Eleanor appeared in the doorway, resplendent in blue silk. "It's time. Are you ready?" "I've been ready since the day I met him," Sarah replied, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. The main room of the ranch house had been transformed. Desert wildflowers mixed with elegant roses in Augusta Whitaker's masterful arrangements. Sunlight streamed through windows Maria had polished until they sparkled. The assembled guests, ranch hands and townspeople alike, stood as Sarah appeared. James waited at the front, and the look on his face when he saw her made her heart stop. He'd never been handsome in the conventional way, but the love shining in his eyes made him beautiful to her. As she walked toward him, Sarah was aware of the changes in the faces around her. Tom Whitaker beamed openly. Augusta dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Even Mr. Peterson, who had come with his new wife, nodded respectfully. Marcus stood as James's best man, proud and tall in his new suit. Maria sniffled happily from the front row, while ranch hands and townspeople sat side by side, differences forgotten in the joy of the moment. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, but Sarah could hardly hear him over the beating of her own heart. She was aware only of James's hands holding hers, of the love and certainty in his eyes. Their vows were simple but profound. James spoke of healing and hope, of finding beauty in unexpected places. Sarah spoke of strength and trust, of learning to see herself through the eyes of love. "The rings," the minister prompted, and Eleanor stepped forward with the simple gold bands they had chosen together. "With this ring," James's voice was husky with emotion, "I pledge you my love, my trust, and my understanding. All that I am, and all that I have, are yours, today and always." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she placed the matching ring on his finger. "With this ring, I pledge you my love, my trust, and my courage. All that I am, and all that I have, are yours, today and always." "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder," the minister proclaimed. "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their first kiss as married couple was met with cheers and applause. Someone, probably one of the ranch hands, let out a joyous whoop that set everyone laughing. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Adobe Wells had ever seen. Cowboys danced with society ladies. Maria's Mexican dishes shared table space with Augusta's refined delicacies, and music filled the air until sunset painted the desert sky in colors no artist could capture. As evening fell, James led Sarah away from the festivities to their special spot beneath the willow trees. Phoenix, now fully grown and gentled, grazed nearby with Sugar. "Happy?" he asked softly, holding her close. "More than I ever dreamed possible." Sarah touched his cheek. "When I came west, I thought I was running away from my past. Instead, I was running toward my future. Our future," he corrected gently, "whatever it brings." From the ranch house, they could hear the sounds of celebration, music and laughter, the mingled voices of two worlds that had learned to come together. The desert wind stirred the willow branches above them, and in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. "Look!" James pointed to where the first star was appearing in the darkening sky. "Make a wish?" Sarah smiled, remembering all the wishes she'd made since coming to Adobe Wells. For acceptance, for understanding, for love. Each one had been granted, though never quite in the way she'd expected. "No need," she said, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. "I have everything I could wish for right here." Above them the star winked knowingly, as if to say that some wishes were destined to come true all along. They just needed time and trust and the courage to believe in love's healing power. And in the years that followed, whenever someone remarked on the unusual harmony at Willow Creek Ranch or wondered at the way the Carter name had come to stand for both tradition and progress, Sarah would touch her scar and smile. Some marks, she knew, were not meant to be erased but transformed, becoming not symbols of pain, but testaments to the heart's capacity for healing, for growth, and most of all, for love.